Hey, nobody's out there, right? Good. Anyway, just for the record, I just picked up my dad at the emergency room, and I want to document my perspective. This is my I'm just journaling. I'm not trying to give advice. First of all, if anybody's watching, I don't think anybody should do cocaine. Probably no one watches my videos, but I was saying in my previous video, oh, like people should just do cocaine and try to get laid, but I think that's not a good idea. But this is my general. I'm just, I've never like lived life before, and so I'm just documenting my observations about life. But I'm like 44, and I guess I'm a dependent person. Like I just kind of like, I went to college for 10 years, and I kept not wanting to work, and then I just tried to work, and I tried to get my own place for a while, but then I was like, oh, it's like awful out there, and so I just kind of went back to my parents' house, and now I'm 44, and so this is my observation, and it's weird, like I'm just thinking, like when I went to Kaiser, when I'm looking at Kaiser, there's all this like there's like these people who are like, some of them are younger than me, some of them are older than me. They're walking into this building at 3 a.m. There's files and like lights and offices, and the whole world is kind of like that. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but I'm basically saying like there's like this humdrum, like I guess society just sort of like needs positions. They need people to do positions, and I don't get it. I don't this is my weird perspective in life, is that like there's government I don't know how to explain it. There's machines and systems and government buildings and private buildings, and as a kid I just kind of walked into those buildings. And then when I was in my 20s, I went into various sort of buildings, and I'd go to some job, and there would be some guy in this system or building who says like, "Oh, hey, this is Jones. Jones is going to show you how to use the payroll machine. The payroll machine. This is what we do on Monday and Friday. Welcome aboard. Like, we'll show you how to do our little handy dandy system. Okay, cool. Come back tomorrow." And I guess as somebody who's basically avoided work my whole life, I mean, I've had some jobs that basically are something like that. There's some building and some guy says, "Oh, this is what we do in our little system." And I guess people just do that. Most people who are functioning adults, they just go to that building over and over. And then they say, "Well, you've done good on your report, and you're doing good." And then like in a few years, maybe they give you like a promotion and you have some resume. But from the perspective of like visiting my parents at old folks home, there's this weird thing where it's like eventually just people die. And so I keep there's just, from my perspective, I'm always wondering like, why do people do it? Like, why don't they just duck the work? I guess most people, they just don't have parents who like paid them forever. But it's just weird. The world seems weird that like some people get to be the guy who is the boss, or some people get to be the guy who is the whatever, some role that they want. But I think it's not like designated by God. It's just sort of life, sort of, there's like there's pressures of money, and somebody just says, "I guess I'm this guy, I guess I go to this building, I guess I'm the X-ray guy," and they just keep going back to that place. But really, like, they could be the graphic artist, or I don't know if they could be the graphic artist, but they're not just ordained by God to be the X-ray technician. Like, they could just go become the sandwich artist, or the childcare worker. And I guess, and I feel like that's a lot of how life goes, is people are just in some system. I guess because I used to be like a kid, and I just was in some system, like some school, and they're like, "Oh, you got to go do this," and you just get sort of pushed around by life as these little pressures and channels. And there's some little building where people just go, "I guess I do the thing. The boss says come back tomorrow." But really, you could just go to, this is kind of, I don't know, maybe there isn't really free will, but when I look at all the different sort of positions that are out there, like some guy works on an oil rig. I don't know how he got into working an oil rig, but the oil rig needs people, and so there's some people who go to that oil rig, and the guy says, "Oh, you're doing good in your thing, just come back tomorrow." And they just do that for years, and that's the way life works, and then eventually people die. And I just wonder, like, why did I not like fit into it? Why did I just, like, when I see those humdrum offices and stuff like that, like I just see these people, they go into like some office at like 3 at the emergency room. There's like weird like lab light offices, and there's some guy who's the security guard or something, and he just goes in there every day at 3 o'clock, and I'm like, Why? How do they do that? Like, how do they just? I guess they just don't have parents who support them, or they got somebody pregnant and they have some court order that says like you got to pay for those kids, or I don't know. Maybe they were. Maybe some people don't do it. They become homeless. But anyway, my general observation is that like I don't know. My general observation is that like if I think about my life, I was in college in my 20s. Then when I got to be like 30, it was kind of there was this period of like, are you going to do it? Are you going to become like an adult? And I had this job and I had my own place at this apartment, and I guess that was the time. And I don't know if it's like that for most humans, but it seems like there's this window of time of like 20s to 30 where it's like, are you going to do it? Are you going to like be a functioning adult in a career with a wife? And I basically had like a career and a wife. And then it seemed like at 32 I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. Like this is scary. This lady's going to use and abuse me, and like I just want to live like a kid at my dad's house. And I thought like I'll do it later. I'll do like a career and wife later. But now at 44 it's like, oh, like you can't like just do that forever, especially like the dating and marriage thing. It's like at 44 it's like, oh, women can't have kids anymore. And everybody who's looking at me is like, hey, you're like an old guy, and like, you know, some young woman who can have a kid, she's not gonna like just be with me. And then I guess most people are like really freaked out about like money and stuff. And so I guess I've just been a dependent person all my life. But honestly, from my perspective at this age, in terms of just being able to do what you want with your time, it seems better. I don't know. I could be wrong. I've tried like jobs, and I've had like good jobs at like good businesses, and I've had my I feel like somebody has to do the grunt work, but I really feel like at 44 years, I could be wrong. This is kind of a cynical perspective, but I feel like it's almost like the draft, you know, like it's weird to just think that in World War One, they had this draft and they're like, we need bodies. And some people who used to be kids are just like, oh, they telling me I should go to this thing. And then people would say like, you got to go to the Western Front and you got to run into machine gun fire. And it's weird that like 100 years after World War One, everybody's like, oh, that was like totally stupid. Like that was just a totally unexamined way of fighting war. War tacticians agree that was totally wrong, and it's just like, but a lot of people just do it because like that's somebody told me to go there. Some guy said we need you at this place, and the guy was yelling at me saying, come on, cadet, like show up and do your duty. And I guess that's just what happens. I feel like to some degree, a lot of life is just people get shuffled into some place from the time they're kids, then they go to some building, they meet some lady. If they get somebody pregnant, they just sort of like, oh, I gotta do the thing. I gotta go to the building. Just a bunch of years go by, and then it's like, oh, like that's your life. But it's just weird. It's weird from the perspective of being 44. I'm always wondering like, why didn't I like fit into society? Why was it? Anyway, no one's listening, right? But there's this Henry Rollins. I guess it's just because my dad supported me my whole life, so I'm basically a dependent person. But really, like the guys who have to do the grunt work, it doesn't really seem like better necessarily. Like somebody's got to do the grunt work, but I feel like getting out of it, it's not glorious. But like eventually, just sort of time goes by and everybody just kind of dies. And so I'm endlessly sort of curious as to why anybody goes to that building. Or there's this interview by Henry Rollins. There's a Henry Rollins interview on Joe Rogan podcast where he has like a gray shirt. It was the first Henry Rollins interview on Joe Rogan, and that it was one of the only people who he was somebody who I really thought like, oh, I agree with that guy. I'm not trying to corrupt the youth or something like that. But he said the same thing. He says like, you got to beat the grind, because it just he said his dad just went back to the same building for like 30 years, and he's like, I'm an adult, that's what you do. And I feel the same way. I'm like, why do they do it? I guess most people have kids, and then Jordan Peterson says that like having a wife and kids, it's the most meaningful thing. And then like some people say like, oh, I feel sorry for you that you don't have kids. But I don't know. The older I guess as somebody who's like doesn't have kids and seems to not really be able to hold a good job, I don't get it. I don't understand how people just wind up in certain places and why they do what they do. And I guess there really might not be free will. It almost sort of seems like that, because like just the fact that there's some different stations in the world. There's some oil platform in Alaska that needs like a level 10 chemistry engineer of some weird specialty, and some guy just trained to do that, and then he got called to this oil platform and he goes to this place and he does the thing. It really almost makes it seem like like humans are like cells in like a body, and the body somehow knows that it needs certain people to do stuff. Because otherwise, it just seems weird. It seems weird that people go to some building and they just do that for 30 years, and it seems so humdrum. I'm just wondering, like, why do people do the humdrum stuff? Why don't they just like duck it? Why don't they get like, I have disability, I have emotional problems, I need checks from the government, I need to stay at home and be taken care of? I guess a lot of it is like, I don't really know, but I would imagine some of it is sex. If you want to get laid, women are going to be like, you got to have a job, and so people go, I'll do it. Or like societal pressure. Maybe there's just like the draft, like in World War One, they were like, if you didn't go to World War One in the draft, they would give you a white rose, and they'd say, "You coward! I feel sorry for you." And people are like, "I'm sorry, I'll go, I'll do it." But it turns out 100 years later that everybody agrees you should have ducked that draft, because that was just a totally stupid war. And the older I get, sometimes I really just see things in those terms. It's kind of a cynical loser perspective, but I see a lot of like the working world as similar to the draft, in the sense that like there's these big people in power, and down the chain they need bodies, and they're like, hey, go to this thing, and you know, if you want money, you got to go to this place. And it's basically one thing that really trips me out. No one's listening, right? But something that I think could be said about pretty much everybody's lives, including mine, including anybody's, is there's undoubtedly tons of opportunities that are way better than whatever station you are in life, and you just don't know about them. I think that's a really weird phenomenon. There's some guy who's a tow truck driver, and you wonder, like, why is he a tow truck driver? And part of it is because he doesn't know that there's like some way better job that's just, he's just not in touch with some better spouse or better job, and so people just do something for their life, and they go, I guess I'm this guy, I guess I'm the tow truck driver, right? Or maybe they really want to be the tow truck driver. I think that's true of everybody. I think they just didn't, they're not connected to some opportunity that the internet probably knows about, and like they're like, oh, you could have done like, you could have just, maybe you could have done some other thing, or you could have been with some other person. It's just it's weird the way sort of life shapes out, and people, I wonder, like, why are people in these different stations and they're in. And why do some guys get to be the guy who does blah, 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 and other guys have to be the guy who, like, mops the floor? It's like, why would somebody, if it's just life passing by and everybody dies, I wonder, like, why would somebody continuously be the guy who mops the floor if he didn't want to do that? Why wouldn't he just say, like, why wouldn't he get, like, another job? Or why wouldn't he just go back to his parents? I guess they just don't, the parents don't pay for people. Anyway, that's my observation. But anyway, like, so I'm basically a dependent on my dad, and I guess that sort of shaped my life. But I didn't really want to be like the guy who does the grunt work, and I just not sold that it's more honorable, but it seems like so humdrum and like soul sucking that I'm just like, I don't know if it seems like I guess the main thing is most people don't want to get stuck with the humdrum. So there's kind of like this thing where it's like, you better get your responsible, and you better, like, if you just stay at your parents' house and play video games, you're going to end up in some humdrum situation. Yeah, but if you're so afraid of that you go like do some humdrum stuff for like 10 years, thinking like, well, when I'm 40 or when I'm 50, then it'll be paradise. But it becomes apparent to me, having like elderly parents, that eventually people just, it's kind of like, what's my point? Just, I don't know, it just seems like people just have time, and any way that somebody can not get stuck doing the humdrum. Somebody's got to do the humdrum, somebody's got to do the grunt work, but it just seems like, I wonder why anybody doesn't try to like get out of it, either trying to find some better opportunity, or just being like, I have disabilities, I have emotional problems, I need somebody to pay for me. And I wonder if just a lot of people are doing that. But no, I mean, if I just look around at like the whole world, there's a train station over here, and at night there's some guy who runs the trains, and he loads the trains, and they find people to do that, and it's weird. It really does make life seem like some sort of collection of systems, like cells in a body, and some people just come to this place, and they need people, and some people go to that place and they do the stuff to make the world run, and it's just weird. Anyway, I'm kind of tripping out because it's 4 a.m. and I didn't get any sleep, but that's my fucking observation. What's the upshot? What's the point? What's the point of what you're trying to say? Just that, like, there's this great interview. If you want to not work, if you want to work, you should listen to Jordan Peterson and don't listen to me. But if you want to think about how, like, work is just like something to be avoided. There's this great interview by Joe Rogan where he interviews Henry Rollins, and he has like a gray shirt, and he says like, you got to beat the grind. You got to beat the grind because it'll suck the life out of you. It's so weird. Just that I don't know how to explain it. I have this fear as somebody who's been sheltered my whole life and supported by my dad. There's just this horrible like image in my head of like seeing your breath in the morning, in the night, traffic, like you're pumping gas, there's some person mean mugging you, you go to the office, you walk into the like office building, and then there's some other, you punch some little card and like somebody says, oh hey Jones, how's it going, and then, oh, this is the TPA report, there's a little lock system, we do this on Monday and Friday, welcome aboard. All that is so like, it's so soul sucking and so cold and just dreary that I don't get how people do it. I don't understand how people stomach it. I would imagine that like if my dad didn't support me, I might be like a homeless person, or I would have, I don't know, I would have found some like scam or some, not scam, but I would have done some like not glorious like ducking the humdrum. And to me, it all, I'm going to shut up a second, but it really does kind of seem like the draft. It seems like the draft is like, there's these pressures of like, no son of mine is going to be a draft dodger. And so people go, I'll do it. And then some people are like, you coward, you call yourself a man. They go, I'll do it. But it does kind of seem like eventually just people die. And a lot of those things, there's just people in power who need bodies. And I think in a lot of those cases, that was definitely true in World War One. It was just like, oh, that was just a totally stupid, unexamined way to live, and people just did it because like that's what everybody else does. That's what people do. That's what we're doing. We're going to the Western Front if we're able-bodied men. But it's worth noting that like a lot of times it was just like, oh, I thought that was awful also, and it turns out it really was awful. But like people just did it because like that's what everybody else is doing. And I think that just is a lot of what makes the world go round. Is just societal pressures and just like that's what I've done for all these years. That's the trajectory my life got on. That's what everybody else is doing. It's weird. Anyway, was that good, Sean? I don't know, I'm kind of tired. It's like 4 a.m. Everything I said could be bullshit, but that's kind of how I see life at 44 years old from my perspective. Okay.